everyone, welcome to Cayenne Knits. My name is Cayenne, but better known as Julie. This is a video tutorial on how to knit the Faith sweater. I designed and named the sweater after a dear family friend, Faith, as her high school graduation present. The idea was to design something for her that was comfy and cozy, something she can just throw on with a pair of sweatpants and hang out in the dorms with her new friends. And yet it could be dressed up, maybe paired with a pair of high-waisted jeans, accessorized with long chain necklaces, big hoop earrings, or however it is that young people accessorize these days, so that she can go to town with it. The construction of the sweater is knitted from the top down and in the round. There will be a short row section, and that is to lengthen the back piece. In this video, I will demonstrate how to do the wrap and turn method, but you are free to use another short row method, whichever you prefer. After that, we will separate for body and sleeves and continue to knit down the length of the body, and then we will move on to the sleeves. And both of the sleeves are worked the same way. Both the hem and the cuffs of the sleeves are bounded off using the folded hem bind off method. And lastly, I will also show you how to block the sweater after it is completed. Here is everything you're going to need to make your Faith sweater. Let's talk about the yarn first. You're going to need super bulky way yarn, something that's going to get you 2 stitches to 1 inch. I want to take this opportunity to thank my local yarn store, Biscot Yarns, for sponsoring the yarn in the making of today's video tutorial. You can pick this up, which is the Cascade Yarns Magnum, and everything else you see here at Biscot Yarns or on their website, biscotyarns.com. And you see a lot of needles laid out here. They're all the same size. It's US 17. That's the needle size I use to get gauge. Again, that's 2 stitches to 1 inch. You may not necessarily need all this. If you like to use the magic loop method, then you can use an at least 40 inches long circular needle to knit all the parts of the sweater. But I am not a fan of the magic loop, so I have resolved to use a 24-inch circular needle for casting on the neckline. And when I have enough stitches on there, then I move on to the longer circular needle. This set is a 36-inch, but if you have 40-inch, that would work even better. And then lastly, here we have the double pointed needles. I personally prefer to use DPNs when I'm doing sleeves, so that's what I'll be using. Let's move on. We have a tapestry needle here for weaving in the ends when we're done, and a pair of scissors for cutting the yarn ends when we don't need the full length anymore. We have 4 stitch markers, one of which I have also tagged on a clippy marker here, and that will distinguish this one from the other one, and I'll use this one as the beginning of round marker, so I know where I'm starting. And then the red stuff here is the barber cord. You could use scrap yarn, but I'm using the barber cord to hold the live stitches. So when I'm working on a certain part and I don't need to work on another part, I will put those stitches onto the barber cord, or you could just thread it through scrap yarn. And then lastly, we have pins here, as well as the base here, which is the blocking mat. And those 2 things are used at the end of the project when you are blocking your Faith sweater. And of course, you will also need a copy of the pattern. A copy you can purchase from my Ravelry store. I will put up a QR code here on the screen, as well as put up a link in the description below. I have put timestamp marking the beginning of each section in the description, so you can always reference to that and fast forward to the part that you want to watch. It is a really beautiful day outside, and I want to take advantage of the beautiful weather we have. So forgive me if you hear any weird noise in the background, like a truck crossing or, birds chirping,
leaves rustling. That's because I'm sitting outside. Okay, so to cast on for the Faith sweater, I had decided to use the Chinese Waitress cast on method. And to do so, we start off with a slip knot. And notice my slip knot, the tail of it is relatively short. And that's okay because we're not counting this slip knot as a stitch. Eventually, we're going to take it off. So it doesn't matter how long or how short it is. So this slip knot is going to be on our left hand needle. And again, it's not going to be counted as a stitch. And before we go ahead and make our first cast on, the first stitch, I want to explain something to you. And I think that's going to help you understand the structure of how to build stitches using the Chinese Waitress cast on method. I think of it as 3 layers. You have your base layer, layer number 1, as your that's your working yarn, which is the length of yarn that's attached to your yarn ball. And then the second layer on top of that is your right hand needle, which is now empty. And then the top third and last layer is your left hand needle, and that lays on top of your right hand needle. And that is the needle with the slip stitch on it. So to quickly recap, at the bottom you have working yarn, right hand needle, left hand needle. Notice how the needles are laid on top of each other. It's in the shape of an X, and I need you to do that. That's how it should be. So lay it like an X. So once we have that under control, we pick up our work and we're ready to cast on our first stitch. So now we kind of go in reverse order. We go 3, 2, and then the bottom. I'll show you how it pops out. So step 1, you lay your working yarn over your top needle, which is your left hand needle, and then you wrap it around your right hand needle, which is the second layer, and then you pull through like so. But unlike knitted cast on, you don't put this stitch on your left hand needle. You keep the stitch on your right hand needle. You will always have one stitch on your right hand needle. But let's take a look at this stitch that we just pulled through. It's twisted. It's not mounted correctly. You notice how the left leg is on top of the right. It's twisted. So we have to untwist it before we can go on to the second step or to make the second stitch. There are 2 ways that I know of to do that. I'll show you the manual way. Way number 1 is to remove the needle from that stitch and then manually untwist it like that. So now you see how the legs are totally separated. Left is left, right is right. This is how it usually present when we are on our needle, when we're knitting. So again, it was like this. We need to untwist it so it will look like this, separated. Okay, and then you just reinsert your needle and then move on to the next step. And I'll show you the second way in a moment when I do another stitch. So I just, tighten this up, not like super tight, but just snug enough so that everything is tidy. So let's reorient the setup here. You have your working yarn, your right hand needle, which has 1 stitch now, and then your left hand needle. And then now we go backwards, lay it on top of the top needle, wrap it around your right hand needle, and then you pull through. Do not pop out in between these 2 stitches. That's not how we want it now. Going forward, we want the stitch to come out at the base here. Right here. Okay, and I'll do it several more times so you can see it more clearly in the subsequent ones. But I want to call your attention to this stitch, the twisted stitch. All right, so you see how it's laid twisted like that, the overlapping. So another way, which is what I usually do, is to kind of like draw a circle, kind of like this. Imagine I'm drawing the circle with my right hand, the tip here. So I just point it down, and then you will see that this is untwisted. Right now it's mounting correctly, and then we reset everything. You have the bottom, the middle, and the top layer. So again, lay it on top, wrap it around the middle layer, and then pop it through. So where we want to pop it through is this stitch here, the one stitch that is on the right hand needle. So popping it through, don't stop yet, but it comes through here like that. And then swing it around to untwist it. And there it is. Okay, and I'll show you it's untwisted. All right, let's do it a couple more times. Lay it on top, wrap it around, under and up, and then pop it through, pull it through like this, and then untwist it, and then reset the yarn. All right, and one more time. The 3 layers, lay it on top, wrap it around the middle, and then pull through to the bottom stitch, and then just untwist it like so, and bring the yarn back to reset it. So notice now that we have a few stitches on, we can look at what we have produced so far. This beautiful braid on underside and also on the other side. So you have like 2 braids, like 2 knit braids. And let's count how many stitches we have. Again, we do not count the slip knot as a stitch, so excuse me. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So cast on however many stitches you need to make your size of the Faith sweater. And once you have those stitches casted on, without counting the slip knot as a stitch, I will meet you back here for the next step. So now we have the correct number of stitches that we need for our size. And the right hand stitch is the last one that is required. So what I will do is simply put that last stitch onto the left needle, and that's all that there is to it. So now we're ready to connect the piece and knit it in the round. And you just want to make sure that your stitches are not twisted. So just take a moment to admire the beautiful knit braid kind of instead of your traditional purl bump. And your working yarn should be on your right hand side. And your first stitch is the slip knot here. But remember what I said, we're not going to count this as one stitch. So we're going to now take that off of the needle and undo it. And now I have an extra long tail. That's why I kept my tail of the slip knot kind of short, because I knew that was going to happen. So we would want to put in the beginning of round marker. I only have one color of marker that is big enough for this huge barrel US 17. So to differentiate the beginning of round marker, I just added another the clippy marker and clip it like that. So I will know this one, this special looking one, is the beginning of round marker, abbreviated as BORM in the pattern. And really simple. Let's orient my stitch correctly. And then we just knit one round. And after we're done with the first round, we are going to put in the markers. So just follow the pattern along, knit X number of stitches, and then place a marker, and then continue on knitting the next set of stitches, place another marker, so on and so forth, until you have finished the setup round. And I will meet you back here for the next step of the pattern, which is the raglan increase. We have knitted the first round and also done the setup round where we had put in the markers, and now ready to work round 1, which is an increase round. So the instruction calls for knitting 1, and then M1R, which is make run right. We're going to do 1 increase stitch. What we do is kind of like spread the left and right needle open a little bit so we can see the space in between. And you see this horizontal strand here that's connecting the two, in between the two stitches. We want to grab that from the back with our left needle. So it's just resting on top of our right needle, not from the front. That's another thing. We want to go from the back and lift up that horizontal strand. And I'll show you where that horizontal strand again, like that. So grab it from the back, and then we're going to knit it from the front here. It's going to be easier for you to just, go in from here because it's like this big open space, but do not do that, because if you do, you're going to have a huge hole. You're going to have an extra stitch, but you're going to have a hole. So you want to go in from the left leg and then knit it per usual. And there you have made one stitch. And then it says to knit to one stitch before the marker. So we just keep knitting across until we get to the next marker. And what we're knitting on right now, until we get to the next marker, is the body, the back piece. And when we get to the next marker, you're going to, if you remember when you were setting them up, they were kind of close together. It's either going to be 2 stitches or 3 stitches. And those are the top of your shoulder. And then we're going to do increases in that space as well for the shoulder piece. Okay, so we're coming to the next marker, and it says knit to 1 stitch before the marker. So here I am. And now I'm going to do an M1L, which is make 1 left. It's another increase. So same deal, look for that horizontal strand in between your needles, but this time pick it up from the front and you simply lift it up like this. I'll do it again. The horizontal strand, all you do is use your left hand needle, come from the front, lift it up from the front. This is a M1L. And then similarly, you don't just find the biggest hole easiest to access to knit, again, because it will create a huge hole. So to prevent that, we want to knit it through the back loop. Okay, so this is like a pretend stitch. So we want to turn the piece toward us. So this is the back, right? And we just put our needle through it like this. And it looks like this from the front. We're not going at it from the front, we're going at it from the back. And then we knit it. And we pop it through like this. And here is 1 extra stitch that is made in between these 2 stitches. And continuing on with the pattern, then you knit this next one. Now you have come to the marker and it says SLM, which means slip marker. So you just move it from the left to the right so you can continue on. And then it says repeat from the asterisk to EOR, or end of round. So then I just repeat what I just did. I'm going to knit 1 and then make 1 right, which is coming up, pulling up the horizontal strand in between the 2 stitches from the back. The way I help my students remember the difference between the M1R and the M1L is when you are doing a make 1 right R, you go at it from the rear, from the back. R, right, rear, go at it from the back. Hopefully that will help you remember as well. And then we knit that, and then you knit until 1 stitch before the marker, which is right here. For some of you, it might be an immediate next step because you only have 2 stitches. I had 3 in my, for the size that I'm making. So in your case, you immediately make another increase. You do an M1L R, and then you do an M1L, which is what we're doing right now. Another quick review: horizontal strand, L is left, and you pick it up from the front and you knit the stitch through the back like so, and then you release it because a stitch is already made. And we have just done increases for the back and the right shoulder, And now you need to do the same increases for the front and the left shoulder. And when you're done with that, that would be the end of the first round. Afterwards, you will proceed to round two, which is a round of straight knitting. There is no increases involved. And once that is done, you will repeat rounds one and two, one being the increase round and two being the straight knitting round for X number of times. You will need to refer to your pattern for the number of times you need to repeat for the size that you're making. Row one, or the right side of the short row, we simply continue knitting as if we're knitting in the rounds. Just continue what you've been doing and knit to the next marker. Here we are coming up to the first marker, slip it, and then for me, the largest size, I am going to knit 20 more. Okay, here is the 20th stitch, and then it says W and T, which means wrap and turn. So first we need to do the wrapping. From the knit side, the right side, to do the wrap, you bring your working yarn to the front of the work. You slip the next stitch from the left needle to the right needle purlwise, and then you return the working yarn to the back of the work, and then you slip that slipped stitch back to your left needle because we haven't knitted it yet, so it has to go back to the left needle. So here's the wrap part. This stitch is now wrapped as opposed to a non-wrapped stitch. This is wrapped, this is not wrapped. So now that we have wrapped it, we turn the work so that the wrong side is facing us. So you have just finished your first wrap and turn on the right side or the knit side, and you have turned your work around, so now the wrong side or the purl side is facing you. Go ahead and start purling until you hit the first marker, and then you slip that and continue purling, and then you will hit the beginning of round marker. Go ahead and slip that one too, and then purl all the way to the next marker, slip that one, and this is when you need to start counting. Refer to your pattern as to how many stitches you need to make before you do your next wrap and turn. And here is the last stitch, and then I need to do another wrap and turn. Now, because we're on the wrong side, we don't have to move the working yarn to the front. It's already in the front. So then I just go to the next step, which is to slip the left hand stitch onto my right needle, purlwise, and then I'm going to bring the working yarn back to the back of the work, slip that slipped stitch back to the left needle. So now the stitch is wrapped, and let me pull at it a little bit so you can see. Right, so this is now wrapped. This stitch is now wrapped, and this is not wrapped. This is just a purl bump. This is wrapped. It has a little scarf on it, or a cowl. And then you want to move the working yarn back because you are going to turn, and you are going to start row 3, which is a knit round. That's why the working yarn is in the back, because you're going to wrap. And you can, you're going to knit, excuse me. And you can see that this is wrapped more clearly than on the purl side. Here is that little cowl, and there is nothing here. So this stitch is now wrapped. You have just completed rows 1 and 2 of the short rows, and there are 4 more to go. That means there are 4 more wrap and turns to do. So go ahead and basically repeat what you have just done, but pay attention to the number of stitches you need to make before you do the wrap and turn, because those are going to be different than rows 1 and 2. Congratulations, you have just completed the short row section, the wrap and turns. Now you should have the right side or the knit side facing you, and you are going to knit until you get to the beginning of round marker. You're going to slip that beginning of round marker and knit one more complete round, resolving any wrap stitches as they appear. Okay, so that's the beginning of round marker. And then now I'm going to knit one more round before the next section. But then if you refer to the pattern, at the end of that sentence, it says resolving the short row wraps as they appear. So I am going to show you how to do that once we get to the short rows. I'll show you a couple of them. Here we're at the point where we need to resolve this wrapped stitch. So I can tell that this is the wrap stitch because it has that collar or that cowl around the neck of the stitch. Let's get it back on the needle. And then here, the guy next to him, there is nothing. It's just all V's, whereas this one has that bit wrapped around it. And you can see that how it's wrapped. So to resolve that, we pick it up, that wrap stitch, with the right needle, like so, go at it from the front, and then we knit the stitch that is up next. Not the second one from the end, but the very next one, because we still need to work on it. So again, you pick up the wrap from the front, and then you just knit it like regular business. And that's all that there is to it. So it kind of looks like knit two together, but you're not knitting two stitches together. You're knitting the wrap and the stitch into one. So let's come up to the next one, which is right here. All right, so here is that wrap, and then here is the stitch that needs to be knitted. So first we pick up the wrap from the front, we just pick it up like that, and then we insert the needle just like regular knitting business, and then on we go. And here it is, the wrap stitch. And there is one more coming up. Might as well show you one more time. Here it is, the wrap stitch. Here it is. And then I'm going to knit this. But before I knit it, I'm going to pick the wrap up. And then I'm going to insert my needle into that stitch and then knit them together like so. Continue with your knitting, but watch out for the next 3 wrapped stitches. When you get to them, you will resolve them the same way you just did. And afterwards, we will be ready for the next section, which is to divide for body and sleeves. That's when we're going to put the sleeve stitches on hold and also cast on a few stitches for the underarm. We have just completed one round after the short row, resolving all the wrapped stitches from the wrap and turn. And we are now in the section for the body, the set up round. What we will do here is to put the sleeve stitches on scrap yarn to be worked on later while we continue on with the body. To do so, we are going to knit to the first marker, which is the indicator for where the stitches for the sleeves are. So let's get to the first marker after the beginning of round marker. Here we are reaching the first marker, and we can remove this marker. We don't need it anymore. And we will take a length of scrap yarn and thread it through a tapestry needle. And we are going to slip the next, in my case, 27 stitches for the largest size onto this scrap yarn. And we're just going to put them on hold for later. So here are all those stitches for the sleeve. You can remove that marker as well. We don't need it anymore. And then if your scrap yarn is not long enough, or it's like, you know, a little bit dangerous, that it might be at risk of losing any stitches, then just kind of tie them together. So I'll just do a ribbon here, and that way it's already a sleeve a little bit. Now that we have the sleeve stitches on waste yarn and we have secured it so it won't hopefully get lost, we need to cast on four, in my case, four extra stitches before we continue with the knitting. And we are going to use the backward loop cast on method to add on. Now the working yarn is on our right needle because it's attached to the last stitch that we knitted. To do the backward loop cast on, I use my bottom three finger to grab onto a length of the working yarn so that there is like maybe 2 inches from the needle to where my fingers are grabbing it. And then I take my left thumb, stick it out, and I go at it like this. I wrap it around like so. I'll do it again. So don't go in from the front like this, but go in from the back like that so that it's wrapped. And then take your right hand needle and pick it up like this so that you can mount it onto your right hand needle like that. So this was the cast on. I'll do it 3 more times as I need to cast on 4. So grab the yarn, stick my thumb out, and then sneak under it like that so that it's wrapped. And then use the needle, right needle, to pick it up and put it onto the right hand needle. 2 more times. Wrap it and then pick it up to mount it on to the needle. Last time, I'll do it slower. Grab it and then wrap it around like so, and then take the right needle to pick it up from the bottom so that you can mount it. And now we have 4 new stitches added. Now we can resume with our knitting. So the next stitch will be the first stitch that is up on our left needle. We have all these extra stitches or the sleeve stitches. Just get it out of the way and then you just knit. But pay attention to not knit it loosely like this because you see how there's a huge gap here. So tuck at it, pull on your working yarn so that you can close that space up as best you could, and then continue on. I don't think you should worry. You need to worry about breaking your yarn. So, tuck it real good because chances are you're using the super bulky way yarn. So it should be pretty sturdy. And then the instruction says you repeat from the asterisk. So basically you knit to the next marker and then you remove it and then you put those, the other stitches for the other sleeves onto another piece of waste yarn, and then you do the same thing using the backward loop method to cast on however many stitches you need for the underarm, and then knit to the end of the round. All the hard work is behind you now, if you would even call what you just did hard. What's left to do is for you to knit every round until you reach the length for what the pattern prescribes for your size, or 1/2 inch longer than what you want your hemline to be. Now that we have gotten to the length of where we want the piece to be, we're going to do a folded hem bind off. There are several different ways to do it, and this is my favorite way. I find this to be the easiest to execute, especially on bulky yarn because the purl bumps in the back are so easy to see. So this is how it's done. The first stitch up, first of all, we're gonna look at the back side. So we want to pull up a loop from the second purl bump from the back side. So the purl bump that's touching the base of your needle is the first one. So the one below it will be the second one. So again, 1, 2. We're going to pull up a loop by inserting a blank needle from the bottom up, and then put that loop onto your left hand needle. And now we're just going to knit
the first stitch and that loop we just pulled up as one. So a knit two together, like so. Okay, and then you do the same thing for the second stitch. So turn it around. Here's the first stitch and here's the second stitch. Insert it from the bottom up, pull up a loop, put it on the left needle, and then you knit those two stitches together. Here we are. And then now that we have two stitches on our right needle, we're going to hop the inside one over the outside one, just like we do with regular bind off. And boom, there we go. And then we just keep repeating that. Next up, turn it around, pick up the second purl bump from the bottom up, and put that loop onto the left needle. Knit it together with the next stitch. Now there are two stitches on your right needle. Hop the inside stitch over the outside stitch, and then another stitch bounded off. Again, second stitch, pull it up, put it on, and then knit those together, and then bind it off the usual way, so on and so forth. So just keep doing that until you get to the end. And then when you get to only one loop, it's just like what you usually do. You cut the yarn and then you loop the tail through that last stitch, and then you secure it by weaving it into your work. We are now ready to knit our sleeves. Before we actually knit them, we need to put the stitches that were on waste yarn back onto the needles. Notice I'm using double pointed right now. My shorter circular needles are actually on loan to someone who is making a test for me. So I'm going to just use double point, which is totally fine. It will get the job done. There are 27 stitches on hold for the larger size. So I usually use 3 needles when I'm working with double pointed needles. So I'm just going to divide that evenly. So that means I'm going to pick up 9 stitches. I'm going to put 9 stitches on each of the DPNs. So 2, 4, 6, 3 more to go, and 7, 8, and 9. Careful not to split the yarn as you put the stitches back on. I imagine it's pretty easy to do. And then you would do the other remaining stitches the same way. Now that I have most of my sleeve stitches on my DPNs, I am ready to start knitting the first round of the sleeve. But I said most of my sleeve stitches. Remember those couple of stitches that you casted on for the underarm? We're going to knit that. We're going to pick those up and incorporate that into our sleeves. So in my case, I have casted on 4 stitches for the underarm. 1, 2, 3, and 4. I am going to divide that evenly into 2. So I'm going to take the way I was counting it, 3 and 4, as part of the beginning of my sleeve. And when I work it around, when I'm here at on the last stitch, then I'm going to pick up the last 2 of the underarm stitches. So right now I have 27 stitches on my needle. After I pick up these 4 underarm stitches, I'm going to have a total of 31 stitches for the sleeves. So to pick up, there are many different ways you can do it. I just simply pick it up like that. I'm going to need yarn. You're going to make sure you have your new ball of yarn or what's remained from the body nearby. So I'm just going to attach it here. Let's see, so 1, 2, so here's my third one. And I'm just going to put that in here. Maybe like this is easier. Okay.
So I'm using my blank needle, and then I'm going to make sure I leave a sufficient length for the tail to weave in later. I'll just pop it through, just like that. And then here is the next one. So I'm going under here and then wrap it around the needle and then pop it through. So that's 2. And then what I'm going to do is just to pick this up on the side, because I'm noticing there's a huge gap and I don't want a hole there. But even if I didn't do that, I'm leaving a long length for the tail. So worst case, or I shouldn't say worst case, another solution to it would be, if I didn't do what I'm about to do now, I can just use the tail to sew in any hole or any gaps that arise from this exercise. But what I'm going to do is actually pick up a stitch here and then knit them together to close the gap. Now there's no gap. So that's 3, and then I'm just going to knit per usual around, going around for the first round, and then when I get to the end of this round, I'm going to pick up the last 2 stitches from the underarm cast on. I have knitted the last stitch on the last needle, and I am almost done with the round. I need to pick up 2 more stitches from that underarm cast on, and that will make 1 complete round. So these are the 2 stitches over here where my left thumb is. And if I go ahead and just pick it up and knit it, I'll do it this way so you can see more clearly, you're going to have a hole. Right? Even if I put this together, you're going to have a hole. So like I said earlier, no big deal if that's what ended up happening. You can always use this tail, this long length that you had reserved, and work that in. Sew that up so that there is no hole when you are done with everything. But what I'm going to do is to pick up another strand, kind of like what I did in the beginning, to close this gap between here and there. I'm not going to do this probably. Let's see what I'm going to do. I am going to notice how, like, I don't have an exact science. I just kind of like play around with it every time I do something because it seems like there's a different way to do it every time. So, okay, here, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to pick this strand up here, and then I'm going to use my blank needle to, let's find that right here. I'm going to go at it from here. All right, and then I'm going to put that random strand I just picked up and mount it on here. Let's mount it on correctly. And by mounting on correctly, the right leg, like we've talked about before, right? When we were doing the Chinese waitress cast on, the right leg should be in the front. So now all the stitches are oriented the right way, and I'll just use that third needle to continue adding on the stitches. So that's 1 stitch added. That random strand I pulled up, I knitted together with that 1 cast on, underarm cast on, so that makes 1. I'm knitting them together. And then I'm going to find this and insert it like that and just knit it. And here we have that 2nd stitch knitted, and now we have 1 complete round for the sleeve. If you are knitting on 3 like I am, and it seems like it's in danger of being lost, like, you know, the stitches dropping off either end, go ahead and use 4. I think I am going to switch to using 4 DP ends here just to be on the safe side. But continue just knitting in the round for 3 more rounds. And then depending on what size you're working on, you're going to have to do some decreases. For those of you who are knitting size 1, 2, or 3, you can skip this section and continue knitting in the rounds in stockinette until the sleeve measures 15.5 stitches from the underarm, or half an inch longer than however long you want your sleeve to be. For those who's knitting size 4 or size 5, we have 1 round of decreases to make, and then we can do the rest without shaping in stockinette. So the first decrease come at the second stitch. So first you knit 1, and then you knit 2 together to make 1 decrease. So here are the next 2 stitches, and all I do is knit them as 1. Combine the 2 into 1, and that's your knit 2 together. And then you continue knitting without shaping, without anything, until the last 3 stitches of this round. Okay, so now we are at the point where we need to make the second decrease. There are 3 stitches before the end of this round. So now instead of doing a knit 2 together, we're going to do a SSK, or slip slip knit. We slip the first stitch knitwise, so don't go at it like this. That's purlwise. This is knitwise, going from left to right, just like you're about to knit. That's how you're slipping it. So you slip the first stitch, and then you slip the second stitch from your left needle to your right. And then I kind of like simplify it. I take my left needle and insert it into the front of those 2 stitches you just knitted, you just slipped. And then I do a yarn over so that I can pop those out. Just knit it together like that. So now I have combined 2 stitches into 1, and then there's 1 stitch left, and I simply knit it as is. Now that you have completed knitting your faith sweater, there's only one more thing left to do, which is to block your sweater. Typically, when I'm done knitting a sweater, I will wet block it, but I'm not going to do that for this sweater. If you look at the stitching, it really doesn't look that unbalanced. It looks okay to me. Here, let me hold it up. Thanks to the bulky way yarn, I suppose, and the years and years of knitting practice. But I will block it while the camera is showing the collar. I will talk about this first. So you notice how the neck kind of rolls down a little bit, which honestly, it's a look in and of itself. So if you like this kind of rolled neck, rolled edge look, then just leave it the way it is. I think it looks good. But I actually prefer for the neck to stand a little bit. So what I'm going to do is to spray it down with water and then pin it to place and then let it dry and set like that. And let's look at the bottom, the hem, here it is. So the hem can use a little bit of pinning as well. It's rolling just ever so slightly, and it will be easy to do. I'm going to use the same technique, which is to spray it with water, pin it down, and let it dry. So I'm going to work on pinning the hem first. First, of course, you lay the sweater down as flat and evenly as possible. And to make sure that I know where that vertical line is so I can use that as a guide to do my pinning. I also check the side edge. As you can see here, I'm kind of lining the side of the body up with this vertical line. And then I can position it in a place so that it is aligned, that I can align the bottom hem to a horizontal line. And that will be used as my guide. I have filled clean water, cold water, I don't think it really matters, in a spray bottle, and I stress the word clean. There was no detergent previously bottled in here. And then I'm just gonna spray it down. Spray it down nice and wet. I'll just do this half first. And you know, the bottom part could get a little bit wet too. Okay, I think that's good. And then why not just start with the corner piece? So I am going to come around this way. Just pin it. Just stick it down. This, by the way, is a blocking mat that I got at a craft store. But if you have young children or you work in daycare or something, you could absolutely just use the play mats that children use or adults use for children when they play on the floor. It's the same thing. It's just foam puzzle piece, kind of. So I'm kind of aligning it on the other side as well. I'm a little bit out of frame, but I'm just aligning the other corner. So again, I can make sure that everything is aligned. And then I just go, you know, like this, a couple of inches. Depending on how it looks, I'm going to pin it a little bit closer to, but again, you know, just use common sense, use your eyeballs, gauge it. If you think that it needs an extra pin in between because it looks like it's rolling up a little bit, then do that. If not, then you can just do what I do, which is I can even count how many squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, like every 4 or 5 squares. That's how often I am pinning it down. And then here is the next one. Just like that. Just pin it down like that. And I'm going to need to spray this side. Give it a good squirt. Let me move the camera over. All right, so here's that. Spray it a couple more times, the corner. And here is that vertical line from the board aligned with the side of the body of the sweater. And then I pin it. And then you see, like here is a good example as to determining whether you need extra pins in between. So you see how this is kind of like raised. Of course, it's exaggerated because there's a big distance, but at least that shows you what I mean by how do you know if you need to put more pins in between where you pin them. And that's what you look for. And here's one more. And that's all that there is to it. Off to the collar. To block the collar, the technique is pretty much the same. First, I'm gonna have to wet the section. My spray bottle is not really behaving that well, but at least it gets the job done. Here we go. And I'm also getting some on the back piece here as well. Okay, that's good enough. And then I'm going to pin the back first. Actually, let me come around, maybe it will be more clear. So my hand is not hiding the work. So again, kind of look for that vertical line, but unfortunately, not a big deal. The hem of this does not fall right on a horizontal line, but you can still use that to gauge where you can pin. So just estimate so that your collar, this line is about the same, you have about the same distance from the edge of your sweater to this green horizontal line. It doesn't have to sit right on that green line. You're just using that as a guide, as a reference. I think I'm going to throw one more pin in here. like so. And then on the side, corner here, and that guy down. And let me get this corner while I'm on this side. Here we go. So that's that. And then now onto the front piece. So yeah, I'm gonna just, help it up, help it stand a little bit. And then I pin right here. No, I'm not gonna do that. Let's do, yeah. I'm pinning it right at the left leg of the stitch. Like so, right in the middle of it. And I'll do one here. These ones, I want to pin them a little bit closer together because I feel like these ones need a little bit more help to stay up.
Just a couple more pins here on the neckline and then we are done. I will leave this alone, let it set, let it dry overnight, and I will check on it tomorrow morning, and by then everything should be set. The edges should not be rolling anymore, and if it is, then I'll just repin it and let it sit a little bit longer. But it should be fine by then. And the Faith sweater will be ready to be worn. Now that your Faith sweater is complete, let's show it off. If you're going to put it up on Instagram, please put a hashtag Faith sweater and also tag me at Yellow Cayenne. And I'm looking forward to seeing your version of the Faith sweater.